Hi, I'm Dr. Mark, and I'm going to help you sing and perform more like the top artists around the world. I'm a professional voice teacher, performance coach, and opera stage director. I've helped thousands of singers around the world learn the techniques and methods that got the top singers to where they are. Let's talk about what makes Aurora's It Happened Quiet so awesome. Thank you to the viewer who recommended this. First time I'm watching her perform, and I'm excited to see what makes you love it so much. Let's see what happens.
Against their will, feathers falling out of a pillow, as if time is standing still.
Okay, a few things. One, keeping the breath flow consistent, really speech-like, easy, and not pushing things. And it's just an easy sound to listen to, right? It doesn't call for a lot, doesn't call her to sing loud, push, force, do anything, because there's just a guitar playing simple notes up the scale. So really cool. What we want to point out here too is you'll notice that usually on stage we want to avoid white. She's in white. There's a lot of white, right? Her hair is pretty much white. Her face is really pale white. Her costume's really white. But you'll realize that they're actually using that white more like a projection surface, where the front part of her is lit by color. They're not hitting her face and the front broad surface of her costume with light that's going to make it look white. We're getting hit by the back, so it creates this halo effect that frames her with that white, so that white no longer draws attention away from her face and makes her visually flat. What it does instead is it draws this big circle around her, and then we see all this dynamic color and shadow work on her face, and it's still enough that we're able to see what we need to see in terms of expression in her eyes and her face. So really, really cool use of white on stage that I think is really effective here. You'll also notice that we're getting this dynamic light use because we have the warm reds coming and hitting her stage right face, and then we have these blues hitting on her stage left face. Since the predominant color is red, it's really helpful because the background is mostly blue, and so this predominantly red with this halo white against this blue, it really creates this bullseye where we are really able to focus on her face and what's going on there. So visually, really smart, really interesting to look at, and it's a really great use of costume and lights to create a really dramatic, unique effect. That's the other thing that we're seeing here too. You'll notice with her hands, they're not necessarily talking in a normal conversational style. They're more stylistic. She's doing more dreamlike gestures, more fantasy-like gestures, but they're unique. She traces the lines of her face. She keeps them moving. They're fluid. That allows us as the audience to know that something isn't wrong, but that this is unique, and we should be looking at this as something almost otherworldly to look at, rather than someone that's crazy or something that's wrong. So all the way around, love it so far.
I can't remember much more, but I know it happened quiet, so quiet. Words falling out through the window. All that remains is a silent cold as the earth, colored red as I land like a flower on the meadow. Oh, love is what.
So you'll notice that there's some inconsistencies in what's going on with the voice. So she is a performer who's prioritized the storytelling and the communication that way over vocal consistency or beauty. She's sacrificing the beauty a little bit for the sake of the communication, which is a choice that is often made by different performers. If we're talking opera, almost never do we want to sacrifice vocal beauty for character. That doesn't mean we don't, and there aren't times that do. There definitely are, especially when you're talking about character roles. But we're talking about something like this that is more about visual and novelty, about novelty with what we're hearing with our ears. Then this contrast, these different colors, this vulnerability, this imperfection, as long as it stays committed and true with what the music's calling for and what she's trying to communicate, then we'll buy it as an audience. We'll listen to it, we'll love it, we'll be engaged by it. Just think about like everyday conversation. People say weird things, they do weird things with their hands and body. The only time it becomes a problem is when it doesn't fit with what they're communicating, or it stands out, or if it's too much, too abrupt, if it doesn't match. One of these things is not like the other, right? That's not this case. Right now, even some of the things that sound a little inconsistent, if I was just listening to it as a voice teacher, match with the fragility of what I'm seeing in terms of her visual presentation and the story that it seems like she's trying to tell. So to me, it still works for her in this moment. Is she damaging her voice? No, I don't think she's damaging her voice in this moment. She's not putting any real pressure behind it, and she's not staying in these kind of tenuous vocal moments very long. So she's being very judicious about how she's using those moments.
You fell apart like a stone can be broken into sand. All those pieces.
One thing I want you to also notice here as you're singing is how she's putting natural accents on her word. Broken. Bro of broken is the accented syllable, so she's lengthening it out, making it longer, even a little longer than the pulse would suggest, and making it a little louder. And then the end of broken, she's letting die off and is a little bit shorter. This brings us to the definition of musicality. You've heard the term. What does musicality mean? If someone's really musical, we're listening to them and it sounds just musical, lyrical, lyric, and it just gorgeous, almost like it's just, it just sounds so natural and beautiful, right? What is it that makes it that way? It's really hard to put our finger on until we find the definition that I love most, which is this: that no two notes back to back are the same dynamic or duration, but that the overall pulse or beat stays consistent. That means a lot of different things, right? And thank you. I think I first learned it from a professor of mine named Dr. Robinson. Thank you. Love it. So how do we use this? The way we use this is, even if we have steady notes side by side, they're all eighth notes. The eighth note that is on the most important syllable or an accented syllable needs to stretch a little longer. And for how much we stretch that one important syllable, we have to rob from the unimportant word, so it's a little shorter than an eighth note. But that together, if you put them together, they cancel each other out and that beat stays the same, right? And that no two notes back to back are the same dynamic either. So we don't just flatline and sing a whole line forte. When we see a line that's marked forte, what that means is the most accented syllable is forte, but everything else is under that and shaped around that. It's a guideline so that either the loudest or the median or the lowest, however you want to think about it, that's just a ballpark, but everything else should be moving around that. And not that everything should be sung at the same decibel level. So she's doing a really gorgeous job of that here. It's very subtle because she can't sing super loud in this moment. It's not calling for it. She's keeping it really fluid and dreamlike, but in a way where we are drawn to the important words, the important syllables, and that makes it easy for us to understand. So, gorgeous.
Spread across a crying land, and you can't remember that day, but you know it happened quiet, so quiet. Words falling out through the window.
It's that quiet, 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 head turn, head turn, head turn. She made the music a consequence of her action, right? Awesome. She used those three distinct moments for her eyes to identify new ideas. So there's a lot of different principles that are involved in that. We can't talk about them all here. But in general, just think, when we have written text, we know that we're into the phrase because usually there's a comma, a period, an exclamation mark. Musically, we know that we're at the end of a phrase because we get a cadence or some kind of pause or resting place. But what is it with body language? With body language, it's our eyes shifting direction. And then the rest of our body and gestures comes from that eye shift, from that change in direction. So you'll notice here that her eyes are shifting before we hear these three different moments. We have three distinct eye shifts. And ideally, those eye shifts are happening one time per phrase, and they're happening on the last note or syllable of the previous phrase. So if I have a sad phrase and happy phrase, as I get to the end of the sad phrase on that last note or syllable that I'm singing, my face is going to start to discover the happy phrase that's coming next. It doesn't have to do it all at once. It doesn't have to be abrupt. But as I start singing the beginning of that last note or syllable, don't wait for it to be over. At the beginning, then let your eyes switch and discover that next thought, the next emotion, the next idea. And she's doing a really cool job here. The other thing that I really love here is how impulsive her movements are. She's not trying to make them overly fluid or precious or pretty. She's just making them really genuine and authentic. And there's a little bit of a rawness to it, like we hear in the voice as well, where it's not trying to be overly polished and refined. It's just trying to be raw and real and human. That makes it really engaging and captivating. I think there's a lot we can learn from that, of not obsessing over perfection too much, but instead letting ourselves try to make the priority being authentic and true and engaging, vulnerable, real, and raw. And then as we practice, it will create its own refinement. Clearly, there's a lot of level of refinement and thought and intention in this performance as well, which is really, really cool. Notice that huge change in lights, how dramatic it was. We got rid of that white and how dramatic that lighting is. Gorgeous, right? It is so gorgeous. It sets up this high contrast dramatic moment that I'm guessing we're about to hear. Don't know, but I'm guessing. Vocally, what you're going to hear here is that the placement's relatively far back. It's on the breathy or aspirate side, meaning that there's more airflow than there is vocal fold compression. We've kind of, her singing for the most part is out of balance that way a little bit, but it's on purpose. It's part of the style, part of the song. It creates this kind of dreamlike ethereal sound, which when she's singing with this microphone, she doesn't have to be loud. She's being articulate. She's being really clean with how she's saying each word, but she's letting that breathy flow kind of go all the way through. It doesn't require super long phrases, and so it works for her in this moment. So rather than judging and saying it has to be clean and perfect and balanced all the time, no, not necessarily. I think that needs to be our home base, and we need to be able to choose that place and know how to break out of that to get different sounds for different styles or different effects. And that's what's going on here. So again, for me, this is really compelling in what I'm seeing and hearing. You see where those blue lights behind her came in? It went to dark. So we see these three red lights coming down. We have 3 focal points. She's still that biggest, most prominent one because she's center and because she's got the white costume on. But there's 3. Before she starts singing, that blue comes up behind her and basically puts a triangle right around her and frames her so we know where to look when we're singing. This is really important. The audience wants to know where to look especially when someone's singing. They don't want to have to hunt around the stage and figure out which person's singing. They want to be able to look at that person so they know that that is the voice, that's the center of attention in that moment. Obviously, there are times to break that rule, but this moment they're being really intelligent and drawing that attention and focus right where the audience wants it to be so the audience knows where to look. Awesome. Then they added the two other ones in, right? Bam, bam. They established the central focal point first and then brought the other two singers up a little bit so that we could see them at the same time. That's also really huge. In terms of movement or focal points, you don't want to bring all three up at the same time. That makes them all equal. It makes it confusing. We don't know. It doesn't really mean anything. But we establish one movement and then the other two happen at the same time. Really cool. Cleaner, clearer sound, more intensity, upper two smile, forward placement, more release and open here in the back, more vocal full pressure. We're in that more balanced position. There you are. So she can do it on purpose. What's really cool in these songs is if they do it on purpose, then we'll accept it. What helps us know that they do it on purpose is when we hear them do it in a variety of different ways so we know that it's a choice. And when those variety of different ways happen with sections of the music instead of on specific pitches or melody lines or vowels or whatever, then we know that it's a choice, right? Because it's part of what the music and text is calling for, not some technical thing that's happening or deficiency or habit. And that's what she's showing us here. So really cool.
Don't you speak over my voice. I will return from the shadows, and I'll bleed in your bed, turn it red like the ground outside your.
Okay, we just went from that clean bounce place down to the breathy place again. What makes it not sound like a mistake, even though it's kind of within one phrase, one section, is that the airflow is staying still relatively consistent. It's not getting choppy, and the placement is still relatively forward and consistent as well. So we can change aspects of our voice and our singing in the middle of a phrase, in the middle of a musical section, but enough of it has to stay the same and stay consistent for us to believe that it's on purpose and so that it doesn't sound like a mistake. Doesn't sound like a mistake here. It sounds like a very deliberate choice. So, lovely. Gorgeous. Really cool. So fascinating. I'm really intrigued to listen to her more to see what else she's got, because I hear a lot of potential here. And without really seeing a lot of different performances, or at least a longer performance of a bunch of different songs, I don't know how much is deliberate and how much is her style and how much is just habit and where it's at. But so far, I'm really impressed. I really love most the genuine and authenticity, the risks she's taking. She's really putting herself out there and letting herself follow the impulse and her instincts, and that makes for this really engaging, authentic, raw performance, which is awesome. I love watching those, and I enjoyed watching this very much and think it was an awesome performance. If you want a voice lesson, a performance coaching, or want me to work with you or your group to help you sing easier, perform at a consistently higher level, book a time with me at mrperformingartstudio.com. You can also send me a 5-minute video clip on Wizio.com, or also questions and whatnot through Wizio.com, and get specific responses from me on your performance or your questions. Don't forget to click like and subscribe down below and tell me what you think made this performance awesome, and tell me what other performances you think are most awesome and that I should be looking at and reviewing and reacting to. I'd love to hear what you have to say. See you next time. Look forward to working with you online.